Hello everyone, and welcome back to Todos Santos. This is episode number 14, and today we're going to be picking up right where we left off last time with some detailing. And we're starting off by supplementing this sort of sunken freeway we built last time with these concrete retaining walls, which basically I'm just using Move It to drag them underneath these elevated roads. And I have these as elevated roads because there's a lot less or a lot fewer issues with it pulling the terrain up. So you see there, I can kind of move the terrain out of the way, put these concrete walls down to get this nice sharp angle in between the freeway and the retaining walls here. And I think that's important to do if you're going for a detailed, tiered thing like this, especially with a sunken freeway, because the base game makes these bridges, which work fine, of course, but there's a lot of air, I guess, and it just looks a little not as like heavy as you want. So by adding in these sharp angles and these tall walls and everything and filling in all these gaps, you can make it feel like they've really kind of squeezed it in there. And also like they've tried to use every available inch of space because, you know, more space costs more money. So it just looks overall, I think, more realistic, and it's more fun to build as well because there's more to do. And I'm filling in all these gaps with surface painter, with concrete, to basically give it the look that they've created this, you know, they've dug out this whole channel for this sunken freeway, and then they've kind of paved over the whole thing, because that's easier than doing, you know, in the base game, you just have these, basically the road surface is the only concrete. So by filling in the rest of it with concrete, it looks like they've laid out the whole surface with concrete and then painted the lines on and put barriers up and stuff like that. And another reason for doing all these additions is that it looks really nice from above. At least if nice means like completely gray and concretey and spaghetti, which is totally the nice look that I'm going for here. And now we're just going through and adding some pillars here. And I start replacing these train pillars with the pillars that come with my custom tram pack, which I'm using as light rail, like I mentioned last episode. And they look super nice. They have a really good texture. And I think I might actually go back and change all the highway pillars to that as well. I just think it looks a little bit nicer than the vanilla one, although it doesn't have the same bulk as the vanilla ones do. So I'll think about that. And I really like the look of this little underpass here. I think that's pretty cool to see it kind of slotted in there with just enough space for it to fit. Okay. I wasn't sure exactly at first what I wanted to do with this green space here, and I thought a service road might be kind of useful, like they can use that to get in and access the train tracks or the metro tracks unobstructed or something like that. And we also add this radio tower, which I thought was kind of cool, and I think this is a little bit of a throwback to my first series, North Rim Creek. I built something sort of like this next to the little airstrip that I made in that series, and you can watch that up. I'll put a link up in the top right if you want to see that. That's one of my favorite episodes of that series. And next to this area, we have just a little parking lot, sort of a dirt parking lot off the road. And within this pen thing, we have some materials, which I imagine are either for like maintenance of the radio tower, or potentially if this is managed by the same administration that performs maintenance on the railroad tracks, that it would be for that. And to finish up this little gap, we're just going to put down sort of a wild grass area with a few trees in there. I figured it wouldn't be too manicured since this isn't really seen by anybody. It's kind of more for maintenance and it's off the main way. So I'm going to let you watch me finish this part up, and I'll be back in just a minute to build a little bit more of a landscaped area. By the way, I know this episode is really long. I hope that you'll be able to stay with me the whole time because I'm really happy with this build, and there's also a little bit of a special cinematic at the end. So hopefully you'll stick around. And I'll see you in a minute after I finish destroying my frame rate with all these trees. a lot of these leafy trees, which look super good, and they really fill up a lot of space. They look dense, and they just give a nice texture to groups of trees like this. I'm trying, as I'm building more, to switch to the low poly trees, which look, I don't know, maybe half as good. They still look really good and way better than the vanilla trees in my opinion. But I've been using a lot of these nicer looking trees, and my frame rate is pretty bad. There are a couple mods I've actually been able to install that have helped a little bit, but I'm more worried about down the road when we have a lot more buildings and a lot more detailed sections. So I'm going to start trying to use low poly trees. So if you catch me using those super high detail trees a bunch, just yell at me, please. And we're filling in this little gap with concrete. I just felt like I didn't want to have trees go all the way through there. That would feel like a little unrealistic. So I figured that this would just be an empty sort of crumbling space. There's that damage decal, which probably doesn't bode well for the structural integrity, but I think it looks pretty nice. Okay, and now we're going on to this landscaped area that I mentioned earlier. And basically what it is a two-tiered kind of manicured garden, I suppose. And this is the only spot we're doing it, at least on this stretch of freeway. And of course it's right next to the interchange. I imagine if they were installing this thing sort of all over the freeway, that they would start with this area because it's where the most people come in and the most tourists and everything are going to be. So they wanted to install it there for maximum wow factor, as opposed to starting it somewhere else. And it's quite simple. I basically just had a road down there to flatten the terrain, because tiered terrain can be very annoying in this game, so you really need to use roads if you want to get any consistency in between different layers, if that makes any sense. And then I just have the King Leno curb network at the bottom, which is such a great asset, so flexible and versatile. And then I've used these sound barrier networks, which have a really nice design on the edge, and I've just put them right in front of the curb network so that it has this cool design on the outside. And then I've just put some gravel ploppable surfaces in between to get a sort of a manicured, cleanish dirt look. And then finally, there's this concrete wall here. Because the sound barriers are, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but the asset doesn't sink in beneath the ground, so you can't really raise it up. I guess it's terrain conforming is what it is. So I had to use this concrete wall there just to fill in that gap in between the two layers. And that's another asset that's super flexible. You can use it in pretty much any urban situation. So since this part is designed to be like the most modern part of the freeway details, I figured at this point they would be a little more pedestrian aware than they had been when they dug out this giant hole through the middle of the city and put down a freeway. So I thought a little pedestrian bridge might be in order, and I thought that this would be a nice place to have it over this nice landscaping. And there's this super cool asset. It's like an open-air pedestrian bridge, and it has some nice siding there and a cool metal roof that just seems to really fit the theme. And speaking of fitting the theme, we're going to finish this area off with some lily-pillies and some palm trees, which is pretty much the go-to set of foliage for landscaped areas in the city. I like to think that there was some sort of committee meeting that agreed that they would just use these same trees all over the city, as opposed to a dictator like myself making sure that they get put everywhere, but whatever. And now we've jumped across the freeway here, and there's this little fenced area, which I imagine they've cleared out now when they're doing this whole landscaping and interchange renovation that they've been working on, but is currently stalled apparently because they've cleared out all this area and they were going to landscape it or do something there, and it's now had time for all this grass to grow, like they just haven't had the funds for the project or something like that. And really I built this maybe like 10% out of laziness because I didn't want to come up with something new, but mostly I did it to get some variety, especially when looking at it from above, because doing the same sort of landscaping all over, I don't know, it just felt kind of boring, repetitive, so I decided to do something a little different. Now we have the first instance where I'm trying to fill up some of this gray area with some texture, and what I do here and in several other places in the build is just have tiles. I don't know, it doesn't really make sense to me, but it's a nice texture, and I don't know, I just think it looks cool. And then this part, I just imagine it's such a skinny little part that it would basically, I don't know, like the pressure from the cars driving by or something would just force that concrete to crack up. I don't know. And then we put on top of that a guardrail. This is a super nice network that just adds a lot of depth and detail to your builds, and of course a stripe so that cars know not to run directly into it. And a few more signs. I want to reiterate how much I enjoy adding signs to freeways and highways and other road networks. I just think it adds a lot of detail, a lot of visual interest, and of course realism, because if you go out driving on a road, there are signs pretty much everywhere telling you what to do, and usually people follow them sometimes. Last episode I mentioned that I wanted to kind of make this whole corridor like a really concrete-y, spaghetti sort of area, and I'm making good on that claim now by snaking in this ramp here in the middle. Usually you don't see left exits in a freeway network, but sometimes you do, especially in urban areas where space is more limited. So I wanted to try to do that here. You can see me struggling a lot with the elevation and really just fitting it in there. But I've found that if you just massage things with Move It, you can make things work 99% of the time. And of course, this looks a little rough around the edges now, but we're going to come back through with another pass at some point and add some details and some retaining walls to make it all blend together. And I'm excited to say that people actually do use this ramp as an exit. I think it primarily is going to serve people who are turning left there we eventually build a neighborhood on that side of the freeway. Like if you go up that ramp and turn left, there's a neighborhood there. So people going from the Old Town Island to this new neighborhood will take that exit. And that helps to reduce the congestion on some of these other ramps, such as this one that I'm starting to build right now. And that stretch of green there was really bugging me. And also we only have, I think, possibly even only one off-ramp heading from the Old Town Island to the downtown area. So I wanted to add this earlier one here so people could take this and not clog up that main area of the freeway next to the interchange. So it sort of snakes in there and then it goes under this road there. Of course, we're going to detail all this so it makes sense physically that, you know, that can be there. And then we come up here and you can see this two-way frontage road there. That was something I was just messing around with. And in a later episode, we come back and we replace all that with a one-way high-speed road, like a normal frontage road. And it works a lot better because I was just having some pretty bad congestion on that thin two-way frontage road. It just wasn't really working at all. And now we're going back and we're just going to make sure that the exit works well as far as these nodes and segments are concerned so that there's no clipping or anything. And again, the solution as always is Move It. So basically all you need to do is massage and move around your segments and nodes that you're working with. Make them shorter, try making them really long, try making them really short and scrunching them up next to one another. And eventually you'll get something that works. I found that usually for exit ramps, a long segment can help. Sometimes a shorter one though, like in this case where it has to be really close to the highway is better. All right, I'm gonna let you watch me detail and fill in this median area, and I'll be back in just a minute. Enjoy. So here's something really simple that I've been wanting to make for a while, which is essentially an emergency vehicle turnaround. This is something I see all the time on freeways, and obviously it's important to be able to turn around and go the other way if there's an emergency in the other direction or something like that. And the distance between exits doesn't always make that practical, so I figured having this one right before the bridge and the smaller interchange that we built a while back would be a good place. And of course, it's just another thing to break up the monotony of the gray, and of course use some more signs and just overall add some more detail to the build. And now that I'm looking at this footage, I realize it's a little silly to have this complete area covered in concrete and then have this one practical part here be dirt. I'm not really sure why I did that, but I think we're gonna leave it and just have it be one of those weird quirks that you see in this sort of thing. And then this is just a little wild area with some bushes, really great bush assets there. By the way, you see me here using network skins to get rid of the traffic lights on the roads there. And that mod used to have a lot of problems, and there's a new version out now. I think it's just called Network Skins 2. It's a lot better. It has a really nice UI, just as functional. So I highly recommend looking into that if you're looking into getting network skins. I used to always be put off by it because people said it conflicted with mods or it didn't work well and that sort of thing. So I avoided it for quite a while, but now I've come around and I'm using network skins too, and it is awesome. But for this video and the next couple videos, I think it's old footage from about a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year. So you'll still be seeing me use some of these older mods, and I've since updated all of them, at least as far as I can tell. And now we're drawing out just this quick road here so we can fill in this gap in between the frontage road and kind of the rest of the city where the terrain slopes up there. I just wanted to be able to create a nice slope there in between the road and the ramp down below, which is kind of hidden under the frontage road there. I kind of like that. I think that's cool. And we're just going to quickly decorate that with these reflectors. And I think those are nice little details to add, especially on a highway. Now we're hopping back on over the Diamond Interchange, and we're using these awesome seawall assets that have a great texture on them. I think those are the same ones I used for the sloping part of the castle walls, actually. And that was all the way back in episode 1. So here we're filling in the gap in the middle of the freeway here, and just to kind of finish off this more landscaped area, the newer, nicer looking area, we have this curb network running through the middle. We'll be putting some trees there in a minute. There's not really much to talk about, pretty straightforward, so I'm gonna let you watch this and see you in a minute. Enjoy the segment. As you may have noticed, it's time for the icing on the cake, which are road signs. So of course, we are doing the usual ones like merging signs and speed limit signs, added lane signs, lane ending signs, exit signs, of course. And then eventually we start plopping down exit markers from a mod pack called Highway Sign Pack Capital Beltway I-495. That's by Finney on the workshop. It's one of my favorite asset packs. And as I've said many times before, adding signs just really adds a nice level of texture and depth to a build and realism, and personally I just find it extremely fun and satisfying to finish off a build with this sort of thing. Although we're not really done with this build yet because we still have to do all the highway lines, but I think you get what I'm saying. So back to those Capital Beltway sign assets, which you can see me putting down now. They're super detailed, and they're basically a generic set of signs, but there are dozens of them, I think, and you can pretty much find one for just about any situation as far as like what the exit is on your freeway. So I highly recommend downloading that. It is pretty big. It's like 83 megabytes, but it's totally worth it. If you're just looking for generic signs as opposed to doing something unique with procedural objects. Okay, so now unfortunately we're going to have to move on from signs and get started on filling in all these lines on the freeway, because obviously the vanilla roads and even the modded roads, when you combine them all, the lines just don't really carry over across the nodes. And I think if you're going for a detailed freeway, you really need to put those lines back in, both the dashed lines, as you can see here, between lanes, and the other lines on the outside of the actual roadways. It's not really that fun to do, honestly. Of course, the mods that are out just make it incredibly easy compared to how it used to be. But I really do think it's worth, at least in the high detail areas, paying a little attention to that and just taking care of that quickly. So we're using a combination of line networks and line decals, and then later on you'll see we fill in all these triangular areas in between the off-ramps and on-ramps and the main roadway. There's a new at the time, at least about a year ago from the time of this recording. It's a network asset that basically is the striped area that goes in between the ramp and the roadway, and we use that, and it adds so much, and it's incredibly easy to use. I highly recommend you download that if you're working on a freeway. You can check out all these things I've been talking about in the description down below. So while you watch me do this, there's quite a bit of it and it's a little repetitive, so I thought I'd maybe ramble on a little bit about what I've been thinking for the next episodes. I've actually recorded, I think, the next 3 or maybe 4 episodes of the series. And so next episode, we're starting the actual downtown area. We're going to be putting together a basic skyline and doing a little bit of detailing, that sort of thing. And then after that, we spend a couple episodes filling in some areas between the downtown and the freeway. And after that, I'm not 100% sure how it's actually going to be structured, but I've done some building. I've done a big neighborhood, kind of a prototypical low-density neighborhood on the western side of the freeway, away from downtown. And then I've also done a bit of development within downtown, filling in blocks, doing some detailing, some building, some transportation. Hopefully that will pique your interest rather than spoiling anything, but I thought I'd let you know kind of where we're going from here. Beyond that, I was thinking that we'd probably just keep working on the downtown area, fill that out as best we can right now, and potentially move on to some more metro building or highway building, or maybe even get started on one of the port areas, which I'm really excited about, like I mentioned last episode. And of course, we're going to be going back to the small Old Town Island at some point, just to kind of fill that area out. We're not going to leave it blank for too long, but we're going to take care of this downtown area first, I think. And then, of course, we're going to be doing all the things you'd expect, like some big suburban neighborhoods, a big resort area, some beaches, parks, wild areas. And then we have this pretty big river and lagoon system running through the map, which I think is going to be really fun to work with and do some kind of wild natural areas and then some more built up areas. So that's going to be cool. But outside of that, I'm really open to any suggestions you might have. So if you have any cool ideas for things that aren't too asset intense, because I already have a pretty large asset collection going. But if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them, and I will certainly take them into consideration. One thing I will say is that I'm fairly certain I do not want to do an airport in this city, or at least not a large one, or a large and a detailed one. I think to do that right, I'd have to install a lot of assets, and it would take up a lot of time in the series that we could be using for expansion or detailing or multiple unique projects. So I think we're going to have to pass on the airport, but if we ever get to a point and it just feels like the right thing to do, I'm not opposed to doing that. It probably won't be super detailed and accurate. I think, though, I may want to do a smaller airport at some point. That's an idea I just thought of. I had pretty much always thought of doing an airport as being like a massive international airport, but we wouldn't necessarily have to do that. So smaller airport could be cool. I was also thinking some more out-of-the-box ideas might be like a big movie set or an observatory up in the mountains, which we'd probably not get to for a while because we're not really going to expand out there for now. It's going to hopefully happen at some point. Okay, getting back to the actual build. So here I wanted to have it look like it was just one lane being added on the right side. And this is one instance where having a really short node allowed me to get that smooth transition. And then when we add these line decals and that damage decal there, it really helps to sell that. And to kind of sell that damage decal as well, I set the speed limit much lower than the rest of the highway, so it looks like people who are driving in that lane slow down to go over the damage more slowly. And here's a really cool gantry asset, and I'm using these, while they're blank here, digital signs, which I often see on roadways, and I think you can customize it with procedural objects. But I kind of actually like just having it blank because I've often driven under those and had nothing be on them, which I think is kind of funny. So unless I feel like downloading procedural objects at some point for the series, which I probably will do at some point, but until then, those are just going to stay blank. And now, for the very last part of this episode, we're going to be putting down those triangular stripe assets that I was talking about before. They're just so handy. They add a lot of detail. They're super high fidelity in terms of the texture and everything. And just compare it here to those decals to this pre-made one. I just think the difference is pretty astounding, both in terms of how easy it is to do, or how much easier it is to do, and how much better it looks. And they're really flexible in terms of slope terrain and the curvature you need with it. And pretty much anything you could think of you can do with these, and they'll fit your situation. And honestly, I think the best part might actually be that they save on props, because where we are now, not in this video, but where I am currently in the build as of the time of this voiceover, we are about a third of the way to the prop limit, which is pretty bad. So that also might be another reason to get procedural objects, so I'll look into that. But these really do help reduce the number of props if you're using decals for all these decorations. Okay, so I'm going to let you finish watching me put the rest of these down, and I hope you'll stick around to the very end of the video because I put a lot of work into the cinematics and I'm pretty happy with them, and I think that you'll enjoy them. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Todos Santos, and I'll see you next time.